He wasn't just a criminal, he was a symbol of chaos. Yip Kai-Foon terrorized Hong Kong with a weapon no one had ever seen in the hands of a local outlaw, the AK-47. From a poor village boy to the most feared robber in modern Hong Kong history, his life reads like a crime thriller. But every bullet, escape, and betrayal was real. This is the story of a man who outran the law, shook a city, and died in chains. If you're into true crime legends that feel stranger than fiction, make sure to hit like and subscribe for more. Yip Kai-Foon was born in 1961 in Haiphong, Guangdong Province, in mainland China, a place that would later become known as Shanwei City. He grew up in a large family with 6 children, and being the third born, he wasn't the one expected to carry family responsibilities nor the youngest who would receive extra care. In this crowded and struggling household, Yip was often overlooked and even bullied by his siblings. That silence and frustration he learned inside his home grew into something far more dangerous when he stepped outside. On the streets, he fought back. He didn't cower like he did at home. He quickly became the kind of teenager who solved problems with his fists. Violence became a tool. And he learned early on that if he wanted respect or survival, it wouldn't come from words, it would come from power. As Yip entered his teen years, stories started circulating in his small village about men who had left for Hong Kong and returned rich. These returnees, often glamorized by neighbors and families alike, were praised not only for their financial success, but for their daring journeys across the sea. They were proof that a better life was out there, and to a kid like Yip, trapped in poverty, it was all the motivation he needed. By 1978, when he wasn't even 18, he made the decision to follow his older brother Yip Kai-Yat to Hong Kong. They crossed illegally, packed tightly on a boat, hoping to land in the city that had become a shining beacon of opportunity for people across southern China. Hong Kong in the late 1970s was buzzing. It was modern, fast-moving, and miles ahead of anything Yip had seen back in Guangdong. Tall buildings, neon lights, booming factories, and money changing hands in every corner, Hong Kong looked like a paradise. But that dream quickly cracked. With only a primary school education, Yip was unqualified for anything more than grueling labor. Eventually, thanks to a hometown connection, he landed a job in a fan factory. The factory's owner was a fellow native from Haiphong named Lao Luen Hung, who would later become one of Hong Kong's richest men. At the time, though, he was still building his empire, and he appreciated Yip's work ethic. Yip spent long hours winding copper wire onto fan motors, a repetitive task that never seemed to end. He didn't complain. He worked for over a year without any incident, keeping his head down and believing that maybe with hard work, life in Hong Kong could change. But the dream was paper thin. The hours were brutal, the wages barely enough to survive, and he felt stuck. Then, one day, everything changed. A fire broke out at the factory. Chaos exploded as workers ran for the exits. Yip and his brother didn't run. They ran into the flames trying to help. Both were severely burned. When Yip returned to the factory, seeking compensation or at least a gesture of support, he got none. Instead, the management labeled him a troublemaker and fired him. Overnight, the one lifeline he had in Hong Kong was gone. The city that promised him a future had turned its back on him. He was injured, unemployed, and living in one of the most expensive places in Asia with nothing but his pride. With no formal education, no connections, and now no job, Yip spiraled. He found himself drifting closer to the shadows, pulled in by people who had also fallen through the cracks. Many of them were fellow migrants from mainland China. They banded together in small cliques, some just for survival, others for crime. Soon enough, Yip joined a triad-linked group led by men from his hometown. They took him in, gave him shelter, and introduced him to a new way of living. One ruled by gambling, drinking, and dirty cash. And Yip took to it like it was second nature. In the world of Hong Kong's underbelly, gambling was everywhere. Yip played to win, but the house always won. Debts piled up fast. Triad lenders weren't exactly patient. When Yip couldn't pay, the threats came. Then the violence. Desperate to escape his mess, he started thinking bigger. He started thinking fast. It was in one of those hazy, neon-lit nights, walking down the crowded streets of Hong Kong, watching rich people pass by with expensive watches and gold bracelets, that the idea struck him he would rob them. Not small-time cons, not pickpocketing. He wanted to go big. Jewelry stores, gold shops, the kind of places he used to walk by and stare into from the sidewalk. In October 1984, he put that idea into action. Armed with basic weapons, Yip and a small crew stormed into a busy gold shop in central Hong Kong. The staff didn't stand a chance. No one had seen anything like it. It was broad daylight. The robbers wore masks and didn't hesitate. They waved guns, shouted threats, and grabbed everything in sight. Within minutes, they had cleared the store and vanished into the crowded streets. Flush with success and adrenaline, they didn't stop. A second robbery followed, this time a luxury watch shop. Brands like Patek Philippe and Rolex disappeared into bags and out the door in under 5 minutes. For the first time in his life, Yip felt unstoppable. Hong Kong, with all its glamour and gold, had finally paid him back. But that joy didn't last. When it came time to sell the stolen goods, Yip made a rookie mistake. He didn't have the right connections. He started asking around in the criminal world, trying to find a buyer. That was all it took for word to get out. The police got a tip. Undercover officers posed as interested buyers, and Yip, eager to unload his loot, walked right into their trap. As he counted out the money, the officers pounced. He was thrown to the ground, arrested, and within weeks on trial. Because he had worn a mask during the robberies, witnesses couldn't definitively identify him. That saved him from a robbery conviction. But he wasn't so lucky on the firearms charges. The court sentenced him to 18 years in prison, which was later reduced to 16 after appeal. He was sent to Stanley Prison, a maximum security fortress known for housing Hong Kong's most dangerous criminals. It was there, behind bars, that Yip Kai-Foon began to plan his next move. One that would cement his place as the most feared criminal in Hong Kong's modern history. Yip Kai-Foon may have entered Stanley Prison as a failed thief, but his mind never accepted defeat. From the moment he was locked up, he began to calculate. He watched everything. He memorized the guards' routines, studied the layout, took note of which inmates got visits and which were forgotten. On the outside, his name was mostly forgotten, but inside his head, the fire hadn't died. The years passed slowly. His criminal peers were either released, rearrested, or faded into obscurity, but Yip remained, determined not to rot behind bars. In May 1989, after nearly 5 years of serving his sentence, Yip made his move. That morning, he woke up looking pale, drenched in sweat, and clutching his stomach like he was on the verge of death. He groaned in pain, convulsed on the bed, and begged for help. The guards, worried it might be a real emergency, rushed to escort him to Queen Mary Hospital, one of the top medical facilities in Hong Kong. He was chained and closely watched, but Yip played his part to perfection. Nurses checked his vitals, doctors examined him, but no one suspected a thing. After hours of pretending to suffer, Yip asked to use the bathroom. The guards allowed it. Inside that bathroom, Yip moved quickly. He had already noticed the IV bottles on his hospital bed. Once alone, he broke 2 of them and created makeshift glass knives. The edges were jagged, sharp, and deadly. He tucked the shards into his gown. As he exited, he slashed toward the officers, catching them off guard. One officer stumbled back while the others hesitated. That was all Yip needed. He bolted down the hallway, out the emergency doors and into the street. Just outside, a delivery truck sat idling with a driver and his son waiting inside. Yip climbed into the passenger seat, held the boy hostage with the glass shard, and forced the driver to speed off. In a matter of minutes, the most dangerous prisoner in Hong Kong had escaped custody in broad daylight. Yip ordered the driver to head toward Wong Chuk Hang, the industrial district near his old factory job. While they drove, he told the driver to strip, switching into his clothes to avoid recognition. When they reached the edge of the city, Yip hopped off, ditched the delivery truck, and calmly boarded a public bus. Just like that, he was gone. For 2 years, the authorities heard nothing. Yip Kai-Foon vanished as if swallowed by the city. But in reality, he was laying low, rebuilding his network, and preparing for a far more dangerous second act. This time, he wasn't going to rely on luck or amateur tactics. He had spent enough time in prison thinking about what went wrong. His new plan would be militarized, organized, and brutal. By 1991, Yip resurfaced with an arsenal of weapons smuggled into Hong Kong from overseas. The crown jewel of his collection was the Soviet-made AK-47, a weapon not even Hong Kong's police had in their inventory. Yip was the first criminal in the city to deploy assault rifles in street robberies. That move alone raised him from a common crook to a symbol of pure fear. He didn't act alone. His 2 closest allies were men who were just as dangerous as he was. One was Chan Chi-ho, known on the streets as Ah Sat, a triad member from the 14K faction who had brains and bloodlust in equal measure. The other was Ma Shung-chung, dubbed Ma the Leader, a former soldier who once served in China's People's Armed Police before deserting to Hong Kong. Ma was military trained, disciplined, and could handle firearms better than most cops. The 3 formed a tightly knit crew. They rehearsed their robberies like war operations. They wore body armor, carried military-grade rifles, and moved with tactical precision. In June 1991, they launched a daring raid in Causeway Bay. They hijacked a delivery truck and drove it into the heart of the city. With weapons drawn, they stormed 5 gold shops on the same street. Each hit took under 2 minutes. Customers dropped to the floor. Shopkeepers fled behind counters. Bullets rang out into the air as they made their escape. The police responded within minutes, but when they arrived, the gunmen were already gone, leaving behind a trail of shell casings and terrified witnesses. The city was stunned. 5 stores robbed in under 10 minutes. Millions of dollars in gold and jewelry vanished. For the first time, police realized they were dealing with professionals who could overpower their outdated revolvers and flak vests. Yip wasn't done. In 1993, he and his gang struck again, this time in Tsim Sha Tsui on the crowded Nathan Road. They picked the busiest time of day, when traffic and pedestrians made escape seem impossible. That was intentional. Yip wanted the public to see them. He wanted chaos. He wanted the media. Wearing tactical gear and AKs slung across their chests, they stormed a store belonging to Se Sui Luen, a well-known jewelry chain. In the crossfire, a pregnant nurse was struck and killed, while an ambulance was shot at to scare off responders. Civilians on nearby balconies filmed the event, and the footage aired across the city. Yip's face wasn't visible, but the legend of a man wielding an AK-47 on a Hong Kong street was born. The footage made headlines internationally. Commentators questioned how one of the world's safest cities could be paralyzed by a gang of robbers. In the aftermath, the Hong Kong police began importing new weapons, including MP5 submachine guns, specifically to counter Yip's firepower. But it wasn't just the guns that made Yip so hard to catch, it was his discipline. After every job, the gang scattered, hid in safe houses, and moved frequently between Hong Kong and mainland China. Yip never reused the same hideout. He used smuggler boats to cross the border and changed identities often. The police came close more than once but never caught him. Over time, Yip's network grew bolder. He added more foot soldiers, more weapons, and more cash. But his vision also began to shift. He no longer wanted just gold and watches. He wanted power. That's when he reconnected with another infamous criminal, Chung Se-kyung, better known as Big Spender, a Chinese gangster who had already made headlines by kidnapping the sons of Hong Kong tycoons for ransom. The two men met through Chen Chi-ho and clicked immediately. Chung had the brains, Yip had the muscle. They began planning their biggest score yet, a coordinated operation to kidnap some of the richest men in Hong Kong. Targets included Li Ka-shing, Stanley Ho, Henry Fok, and Joseph Lau. They drafted names, mapped out escape routes, and began assembling weapons and manpower. But the alliance, deadly as it was, would never fully materialize. In 1996, while smuggling weapons back into Hong Kong through a port, Yip was spotted by a patrolling officer. When asked to stop, Yip hesitated, then reached for a weapon. The officers opened fire. One experienced cop circled around and shot Yip in the back. 4 bullets hit him. 1 struck his spine. He collapsed, paralyzed from the waist down. When officers moved in to confirm the arrest, they were shocked to discover who he was. They had just brought down the most wanted man in Hong Kong, the ghost who had haunted the city's underworld for over a decade. For Yip Kai-Foon, the chase was over. He was alive, but forever changed. And this time, there would be no escape. Yip Kai-Foon's second capture in 1996 ended his reign on the streets, but not the myth surrounding him. The man who once ran through gunfire with an AK-47 was now confined to a wheelchair, permanently paralyzed from the waist down after taking 4 bullets in the back during his last shootout with police. He was sent once again to Stanley Prison, this time under constant surveillance, treated as both a national threat and a figure of public fascination. The sentence handed down was heavy, 41 years, but many believed it was effectively a life sentence. His body was broken, but inside his mind the flames of ambition and resentment hadn't died. Outside the prison walls, Chung Se-kyung, his closest criminal associate, continued the kidnapping plan they had mapped out together. Just 10 days after Yip's arrest, Chung went ahead with abducting Victor Li, the son of billionaire Li Ka-shing. The plan worked. Li Ka-shing paid the ransom, a staggering 1 billion Hong Kong dollars. In a move that revealed how much Chung respected Yip, he sent $75 million to Yip's family, along with generous portions to his crew members and relatives. Though Yip never took part in the kidnapping, his name was deeply tied to its planning, and this money would keep his name alive even as he faded behind bars. But the loyalty wasn't enough to save Chung. In 1998, he was arrested in mainland China while smuggling arms. Alongside Chen Chi-ho and other members of Yip's former crew, Chung was sentenced to death. The Chinese government executed him later that year, cutting off what was left of the syndicate's head. When news of the execution reached Stanley Prison, Yip reportedly remained quiet, but other inmates claimed he wept. The death of his closest partners marked the true end of an era, and Yip, once the king of violence in Hong Kong, was now alone. In prison, Yip slowly shifted. Whether out of true remorse or just the weariness of a man trapped in a broken body, He began reading religious texts and eventually converted to Christianity. He spoke to prison volunteers about redemption, regret, and choices. Occasionally, he gave interviews warning young people not to follow his path, but his transformation wasn't perfect. In 2009, after a decade of relative silence, Yip lashed out at a correctional officer who insulted him during rounds. Using a ballpoint pen, he stabbed the man in the neck, proving that the old rage still lived somewhere inside. Over time, his health declined. He developed complications from his injuries and remained mostly bedridden. In 2017, he was taken to Queen Mary Hospital once more. This time, not as an escapee, but as a dying man. 10 days before his death, a crime thriller called Trevisa, loosely based on figures like him, swept the Hong Kong Film Awards, winning Best Picture. On April 19, 2017, Yip Kai-Foon died in custody, frail, forgotten by many, and far from the chaos that once made him a legend. Yip Kai-Foon's story ended not with a shootout, but with silence. Alone in a hospital bed, his body broken, his legacy debated. He lived fast, fought harder, and left behind a city forever changed by the fear he inspired. In life, he was ruthless. In death, he was human. But whether you see him as a villain or a victim of circumstance, one thing's certain: Yip Kai-Foon remains one of the most unforgettable figures in Hong Kong's criminal history. Want more deep dives like this? Subscribe to the channel and don't miss what's coming next.